Hello guys, this is your friend Rog X Shinobi 2. Oh, and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is What If Naruto Fell in Love with Fu Part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic, then please give me hype instead of comment and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. Get out of my store, you damn hoodlum. The sound of a loud thud followed by pained groans and a few choice curse mumbled under breath were heard through a street in the bustling Kanahagakure no Saito. Of course, the young blonde boy from whom these muttered annoyances were uttered in irritation went completely ignored by the rest of the world save for one particularly irate shop owner who stared at the boy with poorly concealed hatred. What's the big idea, old man? I gotta get shuriken and kunai so I can train to be a ninja. The only reply the whiskered child received was a huff of contempt as the burly shopkeeper turned away. As if they would ever let a brat like you become a ninja. He was about to slam the door to his shop closed to emphasize that point, but thought better of it, quickly turning to stare heatedly at the blue-eyed visage that was the unwitting center for so much hatred in the village. And don't ever let me catch you in my store again or there'll be hell to pay. With that, he finally slammed the door closed, the small door sign flipping to open by the breeze in a twist of irony. Yeah, just you see. The young blonde turned to the rest of the people in the street who continued to go about their day as if this event weren't even happening. You'll all see. I'm gonna be Hokage one day. With that, the whiskered child took off down the street at a surprising speed for such a small and obviously nourished boy. After he was gone, the residents of the busy shopping district turned to watch him go, some of the older women whispering in hushed voices. Did you see him today? Disgraceful. I don't know what Hokage-sama is thinking allowing someone like that to join the Shinobi Academy. Quote, I know, my little Amy-chan would be in the same year as him. I just know he'll try to corrupt her. Well, I know for sure I'm warning my boy away from him. That little demon won't destroy the next generation as well. Quote, of course, all these conspiratorial whispers were lost on the running child who was too busy staving off tears percolating at the edge of his vision. Hey Gigi, I need your help. Glittering blue eyes blinked in surprise at the empty office, framed by the panoramic backdrop of Konoha in the express Ansive window that lit the room. Gigi. The young blonde looked around in mild confusion. It was rare he wasn't able to find his grandfather figure in his office, often poring over various sheets of paper that confused the whiskered youth when he tried to read them over the man's shoulder. He's not here. Well, I guess he's out doing ninja stuff. He is the Hokage after all. With that simple piece of 7-year-old logic sorting out his confusion, the boy quickly went to work. Immediately he headed around the back of the large, ornate oak desk which was piled up with copious stacks of various mission reports and budgeting requests, not that the blonde was at all interested in those. Instead, he began to rifle through the drawers of the desk, uncaring that he was messing up the painstakingly sorted filing system. Finally, with a whine of annoyance, the whiskered blonde threw up his hands in defeat before running them through his messy golden locks. Why doesn't Gigi have any shuriken or kunai? Suddenly, a mischievous grin that many Anbu had come to take warning of over the years split his lightly tanned face. As he looked over at the large picture of the fourth Hokage on the wall. Gigi thinks I don't know about his super secret hiding spot. The grin still splitting his whiskered cheeks, the blonde quickly made his way over to the framed photo, pulling it to one side in a smooth motion to reveal a large tall safe. The old man shouldn't underestimate Naruto Uzumaki. The small boy pressed his ear to the cold metal, never once noticing the strange arrangement of kanji and symbol that spread out from the point of contact that glowed a welcoming blue before fading back into the safe. He twisted the dial with well-practiced hands until the last click echoed through the empty room. With a small cry of success, Naruto swung the large metal door open, only to frown with displeasure. He had seen the old Hokage open the safe many times, but he had never seen what was inside. Of course, his childlike mind had instantly thought up many cool and mysterious possibilities, which were all the more reason he was disappointed. A stupid scroll. Of course, the scroll was about as tall as Naruto was himself, but that was besides the point to the young blonde. Of all the things for Gigi to keep in an awesome safe like this, and he chooses a dumb scroll. With a small sigh, the blonde tried to pick up the scroll anyway, never noticing the 3 sets of hands that instinctually tightened over their kunai pouches in the darker corners of the ceiling. With a grunt of effort, Naruto managed to lift the enormous scroll about an inch before he was forced to drop it with a dull thud. Squinting his eyes in an incredible impression of a fox, Naruto frowned at the large scroll before noticing a glint of metal. With a cry of success again, the blonde reached into the safe, pulling out his prize. His cry of delight, however, quickly changed into a look of intense confusion. What kind of weird kunai is this? He turned it over in his small hands, noting the odd 3-pronged shape and kanji written on a slip of paper wrapped around the handle. With a sigh, he tossed it back into the safe. It was obviously useless with such a weird design, probably some ancient antique his Gigi was keeping as a relic of the past. He swung the door closed with a disappointed sigh before sliding the picture back into what he thought was the correct position. With his brow furrowed, the blonde took one last sweeping look around the office before a light bulb seemingly clicked over his head. His short legs quickly carried him back over to the desk, where his hands began to frantically sweep back and forth under the polished wooden surface. Finally, a small, almost unnoticeable click graced his small ears as a secret compartment jutted out the side of the desk. This one was much smaller than the safe, and its contents confused Naruto even more. All there seemed to be were a small orange book, a strange glass sphere, a few sheets of paper, and a normal-looking scroll with a spiral design printed on the front. Nothing again. How can Gigi have no kunai in his office? Naruto slammed the small compartment back into place with an irritated grunt before walking out of the room, a silent black form dropping down to the floor behind him out of his notice. When the Hokage walked in later on that afternoon with the delegate from Kumo, he only found a rather amused dog-masked Anbu waiting for him with interesting news. Naruto once again walked back down the slightly less busy streets, the people beginning to retire to their homes as the sun dipped beyond the horizon. A frown marred his face as he thought about his predicament. Tomorrow he was supposed to start at the Shinobi Academy. It was a year earlier than most did, but the Hokage had assured him he would do fine. The only problem was that all the stores refused to sell him an shuriken or kunai. The small blonde was so lost in his thoughts he wasn't able to react in time when a tall man suddenly appeared in his path. The result was Naruto bouncing back like he had just walked into a wall, while the tall dark-haired man just sneered derisively. Naruto looked up, expecting to be reprimanded for being so careless. However, all he saw was the telltale logo of the Konoha police force and a flash of red eyes before the man walked on, ignoring the blonde like he had never even been there. Naruto picked himself up off the dusty ground, mumbling to himself about unobservant people before the figurative light bulb once again clicked over his head. A grin snaked its way across his face as he took off on small legs in the direction of the Uchiha compound. Those people with the funny red eyes always have kunai pouches. I'm sure if I borrow a few, nobody would notice. With that in mind, and with a small chuckle to himself, Naruto quickly found himself winding through the streets towards the western districts of Konoha. A good half an hour later, and the whiskered child was staring up at the rather imposing stone wall that separated the Uchiha compound from Kono A proper. He never really thought about the Uchiha all that much, but he found them having a wall around their compound sort of strange. With a small dismissive shrug, he quickly began to scale the wall, using handholds and cracks that would normally be too small for any other hand to grip. Finally, with a slightly comical wiggling of his legs, he flipped himself over and dropped to the ground on the other side of the wall. He rubbed his head sheepishly as he looked down at the small flower bed he had crushed from his impromptu landing, but quickly pushed it from his mind. It was darker now, the sun having fully set beyond the horizon, and it provided Naruto with great cover as he stealthily, at least to him anyway, made his way through the back garden of whoever's home he had landed in. Strangely, none of the lights in the house were on. It wasn't that late at night. In fact, Naruto would usually be preparing himself a cup ramen for dinner about now. To satiate his curiosity, he peered in through a low window, but sure enough, the house seemed deserted. However, instead of trying to think why, the blonde just grinned. This would make it all the easier to grab some kunai or shuriken. He tried to lift the window, but it wouldn't budge an inch. With a small grunt of annoyance, Naruto abandoned it and quickly hurried back through the garden, out onto an Tai street. Once again, the blonde found it curious that nobody was out. He had never seen a street in Konoha so quiet before midnight. Feeling slightly less sure of himself but staying strong regardless, Naruto scampered across the street, ducking into another alley between two homes. Stopping to think for a moment, he remembered that all the clan compounds in Konoha were somewhat self-sustaining. That meant there had to be stores to buy things, and he hoped that would include ninja supplies. Ducking his head back out into the moonlit street, he nearly squealed with delight as he spotted exactly what he was looking for. The store was across the street from him, a large sign hanging out front that Naruto couldn't quite make out, but the various weapons in the window were visible clear as day, as was the large fan symbol emblazoned across the door. With as much speed as his small body could muster, he dashed across to the door, giving it an experimental push only to find it locked. Frowning, he looked around, noting the small flap at the bottom of the door, obviously made for whatever animal the shop owner kept. He was about to go around to the side alley to find another way in when he heard the sound of approaching footsteps echo through the silent streets. His eyes widened in surprise and fear of being caught. Naruto immediately ducked down, pushing himself through the small mal flap that was obviously never designed for human use. He quickly found himself stuck, his hips just a little too big to get through. However, as the footsteps came closer, he found a new burst of energy, scrabbling with all he could and finally managing to push his lithe body into the store. He sat there, leaning against the door, just panting as he calmed himself down. He was beginning to regret coming here. Generally, people left him alone in Konoha, but sometimes the people would be slightly less forgiving. He noticed the people with red eyes tended to be among that group. Check around some more. I was sure I heard something. Naruto's heart nearly stopped beating in his chest as he heard the obviously male voice call out from the street. Yeah, I don't see anything. I'm sure you were just hearing things. I swear, you've been too jumpy lately, gotta calm down. Another voice joined the first, sounding much closer than his companion, making Naruto break out in a cold sweat. Shut up. You know Fugaku-sama's orders. While the meetings are taking place, the streets have to be cleared. We don't want anybody to find out what's going on. If there's a spy out here from the Hokage, we have to flush them out and deal with them. Even in his fear, Naruto managed to be confused by the conversation taking place now painfully close to him. Why would the Hokage need to spy on his own shinobi? That didn't make sense at all. To satisfy his burning curiosity, he ever so slowly poked his head up and looked out the window, only to immediately duck back down as he caught a glimpse of burning red eyes. Hey, what was that? The voice sounded suspicious and footsteps began to draw near to the shop he was hiding in. What? The voice sounded somewhat bored, as if he was just eager to go home and relax instead of trudging around outside for threats he was certain wouldn't be there. There was something in the shop, I'm sure of it. Naruto gulped in a way he hoped wasn't too loud, even though it seemed deafening in his own ears. He quickly scurried further into the shop, hoping to use the shadows to hide himself. On the way, his hand closed over the hilt of a kunai from one of the counters and he instinctively clutched it to his chest as if it would protect him from anything. He pressed himself as close to the wall as he could beneath a counter as he heard the doorknob rattle a few times before the sound of a key clicking in a lock was heard. Footsteps came next, each slap of a sandal against a wooden floor like a cannon firing right next to the terrified blonde. That next minute was agonizing on Naruto's nerves as the Uchiha continued to walk around the small shop, before sighing to himself and walking towards the door. As his hand touched the doorknob to close it, the blonde let out a small breath he didn't even realize he had been holding. Unfortunately, it wasn't small enough, and before the air had fully left his lungs, a hand wrapped around his collar, yanking him to his feet so that his eyes were E-level with a set of angry Sharingan. Well, what do we have here? A little young to be a spy, don't you think? He sneered across at his companion, but Naruto made use of his distraction as lashed out with the kunai clutched to his chest on instinct. With a cry of pain and anger, the man dropped Naruto, clutching his arm that was now spraying blood in a long arc. Naruto wasted no time and sprinted out of the store, slipping between the legs of the man's surprised companion in one smooth motion before vaulting to his feet and taking off at a sprint. The two Uchiha weren't surprised for long, and they quickly took off after the tiny child, using their shinobi training to enhance the muscles in their legs to take off at incredible speed. By the time Naruto was dropping back down on the other side of the wall, the two shinobi were right behind him. Using speed and energy, the blonde didn't even realize he took off again, staying just ahead of his pursuers. He did everything in his power to keep the two Uchiha from getting him, sliding through holes in fences that they were too big to get through, using his knowledge of the alleyways to confuse them, and even at one point grabbing a peacefully sleeping cat and throwing it at the men. It turned out Tora, as the name on its collar read, didn't appreciate the early wake up and managed to keep the two would-be capturers busy for a surprising amount of time. Long enough at least for the terrified blonde to reach his destination. It wasn't all that uncommon for Naruto to be chased due to his recent history as somewhat of a prankster. However, in those situations he would have pre-planned his escape, usually with a few hidden surprises for his pursuers, giving him ample time to make it to the Hokage Tower or his home where he knew he was safe. Right now though, he had no plan, no tricks to pull out of thin air, and there was only one place nearby he would feel safe. He burst through the flaps in front of Ichiraku's ramen, surprising the young teenage girl washing dishes behind the counter. She didn't have time to even cry out in surprise before the whiskered blonde had jumped the small counter, using the seats as a springboard. The brown-haired girl just looked down at his quivering form in shock, but only had time to do that before two men appeared in front of her, almost making her drop the bowl she was cleaning in fright. Quickly regaining her composure, she placed a well-worn smile on her face. "Welcome to Ichiraku Ramen, I'm Ayame, how can I help you?" One of the men, his Sharingan active and spinning wildly, gave the small shop a once-over before giving a contemptuous snort. He span on his heel and marched out, the scowl on his face only intensifying. The man behind him gave Ayame an apologetic look before hurrying out after his companion. Letting out a small sigh, Ayame turned to the still shaking Naruto, a small frown alighting on her usually upbeat and smiling face. "What did you do now, Naruto?" She let out another sigh as the blonde boy gave her a sheepish, if not slightly strained smile as he rubbed the back of his neck, out of habit or nerves she couldn't tell. She finally allowed a soft smile to play across his lips as she offered him a hand, which he gratefully took, clinging to her arm like a lifeline. She brought him around to the back of the shop, leading him like a stray dog to the couch in the small living space back there. "Just stay there, Naruto, I'll go make us some tea, okay? Then you can explain whatever silly prank you pulled this time." Naruto gave a small quivering nod, earning him a glowing smile as Ayame quickly moved back to the kitchen area. "Tea, thanks, Ayame-chan." The girl turned around again at the door, holding onto the frame as she smiled serenely at the little boy she considered a little brother in everything but blood. "Hey, what are big sisters for, nay?" Naruto finally seemed to relax at that, settling more into the couch as Ayame finally moved off to prepare some tea. An older man with graying hair and a fatherly smile seemingly permanently set on his wrinkling features chose that moment to walk down the stairs. "Oh, see what all the commotion was about. Ah, Naruto, my boy, what brings you to our humble abode?" The small blonde turned at the familiar voice, a small but true smile appearing on his whiskered face at the sight of one of his precious people. "Tsuki Oji-san." The man simply chuckled at the exuberant cry as he settled a hand on the young boy's shoulder, his calloused palm easily dwarfing the boy's small frame. "Now who did you manage to upset this time, my boy? I hope it wasn't a Hyuga. You know how they reacted last time. He let out a throaty chuckle as he fondly remembered Naruto half crawling into his store, one arm and leg having been at the receiving end of the Hyuga's fearsome taijutsu style. It had taken a few hours before the boy could feel anything at all in those limbs.